Faith, a red dust swirls across the Spanish plains, carrying with it the echoes of 1,000 gunfights that never really happened. Yet something in this desert feels too real, too familiar, as if the ghosts of fictional cowboys have somehow taken root in the ancient soil of Almafea. Deep in the southeastern corner of Spain lies a landscape that has fooled the world for over 60 years. To the untrained eye, it is just another Mediterranean desert, rolling hills of red earth, scattered cacti, and endless blue skies. But step onto this ground, and you'll understand why Hollywood fell under its spell. This is Almafea, the secret American West that never existed in America. Since 1964, over 300 Western films have been shot in this single Spanish province, from Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy starring Clint Eastwood to major Hollywood productions. Almafea has doubled as Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, and every other corner of the mythical American frontier. But the real question isn't why filmmakers chose this place. It is why this place chose them back. The story begins in 1963 when Italian director Sergio Leone arrived in Almafea with a modest budget and a dream to create the definitive Western. Local Spanish authorities, eager for foreign investment during Franco's isolated regime, offered the production unprecedented access to vast stretches of desert, complete with existing Western-style towns left over from previous films. What Leone found there would change cinema forever, and possibly cost him his peace of mind. According to film historian Carlos Aguilar, who spent decades documenting Almafea's cinematic history, Leone became obsessed with the landscape in a way that went far beyond professional necessity. He would disappear for hours, sometimes entire days, walking alone through the desert. Aguilar recorded in his private journals. The crew would find him just standing there, staring at nothing as if listening to something only he could hear. The desert of Almafea bears an uncanny resemblance to the American Southwest, but there is something more, something that cameras capture but human eyes often miss. The light falls differently here. Shadows stretch longer. The wind carries sounds that don't match the landscape. Local Spanish crews who worked on dozens of Western productions developed their own folklore about the desert, whispering stories that production companies preferred to keep quiet. Juan Martinez, a location scout who worked in Almafea from 1965 to 1995, kept detailed records of what he called incidents during filming. Equipment would malfunction in specific locations. Actors reported seeing figures in the distance that weren't part of the cast. Most disturbing of all, several productions captured footage they couldn't explain. Shadowy riders on horses appearing in the background of scenes, always just blurry enough to dismiss as optical illusions. The mystery deepens when you examine the history of Almafea itself. Long before Hollywood arrived, this region was home to some of Spain's most violent conflicts. During the Spanish Civil War 1936 to 1939, the desert served as a dumping ground for the casualties of Franco's forces. Historians estimate that over 3,000 people were buried in unmarked graves throughout the province, their bodies left to the mercy of the unforgiving landscape. But the violence goes back much further. Archaeological evidence suggests that Almafea has been a site of conflict for over 2,000 years. Roman soldiers, Moorish armies, Christian Reconquista forces, and countless bandits and outlaws have spilled blood on this same red earth. Local folklore speaks of La Tierra que recuerda, the earth that remembers. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a paranormal researcher from the University of Granada, spent 3 years studying the phenomenon of Almafea's appeal to Western filmmakers. Her research, published only in Spanish academic journals and largely ignored by mainstream media, documents what she calls psychogeographic resonance, the theory that certain landscapes retain emotional and spiritual imprints from traumatic events. Almafea doesn't just look like the American West, Dr. Vasquez explained in a 2018 interview. It feels like it. The violence, the desperation, the lawlessness, all of these emotions have soaked into the ground over centuries. When filmmakers arrive here, they're not just choosing a location that resembles their vision. They're choosing a place where that vision already exists, waiting to be awakened. The evidence supporting Dr. Vasquez's theory is both compelling and disturbing. Film productions in Almerfea consistently report higher levels of accidents, equipment failures, and crew psychological distress compared to other locations. A confidential insurance report from 1978, obtained through Spanish Freedom of Information laws, documented that Almerfea-based film shoots experienced injury rates 400% higher than the industry average. More unsettling are the personal accounts from actors and directors who worked there. Clint Eastwood, in a rarely quoted 1975 interview with Italian magazine SIAC, mentioned feeling haunted by the Almerfea desert. "There were moments during filming when I'd forget I was making a movie," Eastwood said. "The landscape made everything feel real, like we were actually living in the Old West. Sometimes that feeling wouldn't go away when the cameras stopped rolling." Director Sam Peckinpah, known for his psychologically intense Western films, shot several scenes for The Wild Bunch in Almerfea. His assistant director, Robert Wolfe, later wrote in his memoirs that Peckinpah became unusually agitated during the Spanish portion of filming. Sam would stare at the desert for hours, muttering about seeing the ghosts of dead cowboys. "I thought he was being poetic until I started seeing them too." The phenomenon extends beyond individual experiences to measurable changes in the films themselves. Cinema studies professor Maria Rodriguez conducted a frame-by-frame analysis of Western films shot in Almerfea versus those shot in the American West. Her research, published in the journal Landscape and Memory, revealed that Almerfea shot westerns contained 67% more wide shots of empty landscape, 45% longer takes, and significantly more scenes featuring solitary figures against vast backdrops. The landscape seems to influence not just how filmmakers feel, but how they shoot, Rodriguez concluded. It is as if Almerfea demands to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have its story told through these fictional narratives. The Spanish government, initially thrilled by the economic benefits of film tourism, eventually became concerned about Almerfea's growing reputation. In 1982, a classified report commissioned by the Ministry of Culture recommended limiting Western film productions in the province due to unexplained incidents affecting crew psychological welfare and potential negative impact on tourism. The report, declassified in 2015, contains disturbing details about specific incidents. During the filming of For a Few Dollars More, in 1965, 3 crew members reported simultaneously experiencing vivid hallucinations of Civil War-era executions. In 1973, the production of My Name Is Nobody was temporarily halted when the entire cast and crew claimed to hear gunshots echoing across the desert at dawn, despite no live ammunition being used and no other film shoots in the area. Perhaps most chilling is the account from the 1976 production of A Genius, Two Partners, and a Dupe. The film's second unit director, Giuseppe Colizzi, documented in his production notes that the crew discovered what appeared to be an abandoned Western film set in a remote part of the desert. Local authorities had no record of any production company building structures in that location. When the crew investigated further, they found accurate costumes, weapons, and equipment that appeared to have been recently used, despite the area being completely isolated. The Spanish Civil Guard conducted an investigation but found no evidence of recent human activity in the area. Soil analysis revealed that the wooden structures were at least 50 years old, predating any known film production in Almerfea. Yet the costumes and equipment showed signs of recent use and matched no known film inventory from previous productions. Local Spanish residents of Almerfea have their own explanations for these phenomena. Carmen Delgado, whose family has lived in the region for 6 generations, grew up hearing stories about Los Vaqueros Fantasmas, the phantom cowboys. According to local folklore, these spirits aren't the ghosts of dead Americans, but rather the accumulated psychic energy of all the fictional cowboys who have died on this desert in hundreds of films. The desert doesn't understand the difference between real death and movie death, Carmen explained in 2019. So many cowboys have been killed here on camera that the land thinks it is a real battlefield. The ghosts you see aren't from our history, they're from your movies. This theory gained unexpected support from Dr. Michael Harrison, a British psychologist who specializes in environmental psychology. Dr. Harrison's research suggests that locations where intense emotional performances are repeatedly enacted can develop what he terms residual emotional fields. When actors pour genuine emotion into their performances, that emotional energy has to go somewhere. Dr. Harrison explains. In most filming locations, it dissipates quickly, but in certain landscapes, particularly those that already carry historical trauma, these emotional residues can accumulate and eventually manifest as shared psychological experiences. The evidence becomes even more compelling when you consider the specific type of Western films that Almorfea has attracted. Unlike the heroic, black, and white morality tales of classic Hollywood Westerns, the majority of films shot in Almorfea belong to the spaghetti Western subgenre. Darker, more violent and psychologically complex stories about morally ambiguous characters in lawless landscapes. These films often explore themes of death, revenge, and the psychological toll of violence, themes that seem to resonate with Almorfea's own traumatic history. It is as if the landscape actively draws productions that mirror its own dark past, creating a feedback loop between fictional violence and historical reality. The economic impact of Western film production in Almorfea has been substantial. The province estimates that film tourism generates over 40 million euros annually, supporting thousands of local jobs. 3 permanent Western-themed amusement parks, Western Lyon, Fort Bravo, and Oasis, have been built on former film sets, offering tourists the chance to experience their own Western adventures in the authentic landscapes where cinematic history was made. But even these commercial enterprises haven't escaped the strange influence of the desert. Park employees frequently report unusual experiences, unexplained sounds of horses galloping at night, the sensation of being watched during closing procedures, and equipment that operates independently. The management of Fort Bravo has an unofficial policy of never leaving employees alone in the park after sunset. The most recent and perhaps most disturbing incident occurred in 2020 during the filming of an independent Western called Blood Desert. The production was forced to shut down after 3 days when the entire cast and crew reported experiencing shared nightmares featuring identical imagery, a Civil War-era mass execution taking place in the exact location where they were filming. Production assistant Sarah Chen documented the incident in her blog. "We all had the same dream, down to the smallest details. We saw Spanish soldiers executing prisoners while townspeople watched. We could smell the gunpowder, feel the fear in the air. When we compared notes the next morning, we realized we'd all witnessed the same event. An event that supposedly never happened at our filming location." Historical research later revealed that Chen's description matched documented accounts of a 1937 execution that took place less than a mile from their filming location. Information that was not publicly available and that none of the crew members could have access. The Spanish government's relationship with Almorfea's film industry remains complicated. While the economic benefits are undeniable, the Ministry of Culture continues to monitor unusual incidents related to film productions. A confidential 2021 report obtained through investigative journalism suggests that Spanish authorities are considering establishing psychological support protocols specifically for Almorfea film crews. Dr. Vasquez's research has expanded to include other locations around the world where similar phenomena occur. Her preliminary findings suggest that landscapes with histories of violence and trauma can indeed develop what she calls psychic saturation, a condition where the accumulated emotional energy of past events creates a kind of spiritual magnetic field that draws similar experiences. Almorfea is not unique in its ability to affect human consciousness, Dr. Vasquez notes, but it may be unique in how that ability has been channeled through the medium of cinema. The act of filming, of creating fictional narratives, seems to amplify and focus whatever forces are at work there. The international film community remains divided on how to interpret these reports. Major studios generally dismiss accounts of paranormal activity as the result of suggestion, fatigue, and the psychological stress of working in harsh desert conditions. However, several prominent directors have quietly begun consulting with paranormal researchers before scheduling productions in Almerfea. Independent filmmaker Marcus Webb, who shot a documentary about Almerfea's film history in 2019, became convinced that something genuinely supernatural affects the area. "I went there as a skeptic," Webb admits. "I left as a believer. There is something in that desert that responds to storytelling, something that wants these stories to be told. The question is whether we're telling the stories or whether the stories are telling themselves through us." The mystery of Almerfea extends beyond film productions to affect regular visitors as well. Tourism offices report that approximately 15% of Western film fans who visit Almerfea return with stories of unusual experiences, seeing figures in period costumes in their peripheral vision, hearing unexplained sounds of horses and gunfire, or feeling sudden overwhelming emotions of sadness or fear in certain locations. Photography enthusiasts have captured hundreds of images in Almerfea that appear to show anachronistic figures or objects in the landscape. While most can be explained as pareidolia, the human tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random visual information, some defy easy explanation. A 2018 analysis by digital forensics expert Dr. Alan Chen concluded that at least 12 photographs taken in Almerfea between 2010 and 2018 show anomalous humanoid figures that cannot be accounted for by known photographic artifacts or digital manipulation. The most famous of these images, taken by British tourist James Morrison in 2016, appears to show a man in Civil War-era Spanish military uniform standing on a ridge, approximately 200 meters from the photographer. The figure is clearly visible in 3 consecutive frames taken over a period of 15 seconds. When Morrison climbed to the ridge to investigate, he found no evidence of any person having been there. No footprints, no tire tracks, and no way for someone to have descended the steep cliff face without being seen. Local Spanish paranormal investigators have documented over 400 similar incidents since 1980. Their research suggests that the phenomena occur most frequently in areas where multiple film productions have taken place, particularly locations that have been used for scenes involving death or violence. The question that haunts researchers is whether these experiences represent genuine paranormal activity or some form of mass psychological suggestion enhanced by the dramatic landscape and cultural associations with the Western genre. Dr. Rodriguez argues for a third possibility. What if the boundary between fiction and reality becomes genuinely blurred in places where that boundary has been repeatedly tested? What if Almerfea has become a kind of dimensional intersection where imaginary events can achieve a form of reality through repeated enactment? This theory gains credibility when considered alongside recent research in quantum consciousness and environmental psychology. Some scientists now hypothesize that human consciousness can indeed imprint information onto physical environments under certain conditions, particularly when intense emotions are involved, and when those emotions are repeatedly focused on specific locations. The ongoing mystery of Almerfea's effect on Western filmmaking raises profound questions about the relationship between landscape and human consciousness, between fiction and reality, and between individual and collective psychological experiences. As more researchers turn their attention to this unique phenomenon, one thing becomes clear. There is far more to Almerfea's cinematic legacy than meets the eye. The desert keeps its secrets well, revealing them only to those who are willing to look beyond the surface of what appears to be simple geographic coincidence. In Almerfea, the lines between reality and fiction, between past and present, between the living and the dead, seem to blur in the heat haze rising from the red earth. Perhaps that is why Western filmmakers continue to return to this Spanish desert, Despite the documented risks and unexplained incidents, perhaps they recognize, consciously or unconsciously, that they're not just making movies in Almerfaya. They're participating in something much larger and more mysterious. In the end, the question isn't why so many Westerns have been filmed in the same place. The question is whether Almerfaya chose to become the spiritual home of the Western genre, or whether the Western genre chose Almerfaya as the place where its deepest truths could finally be told. The answer may lie buried somewhere in the red dust of the Spanish desert, waiting for the next filmmaker brave enough to dig it up.